Hey everybody, we're going to change this tire, some fresh tires. I'm going to show you how to do it. 50s and the 70s and the 110s all have the same hardware back. So this tutorial will work for all those bikes. Start with the brake rod, this 14mm nut back here. You can take it off with a wrench or a ratchet too. Next you need a 19mm and a 14mm. Scoot it forward a little bit and take the chain off. Try and tuck the chain on the outside out of the way there. And you're ready to pull the axle out. Now pull this brake hub out and set that aside. Okay, so you got your wheel off. Grab a stem remover and take the valve core out. Make sure all the air is out. And there's a nut on the stem. That's a 12mm. You got to take that off. Make sure you have some good tire irons. I like these Motion Pro style, but this spoon type works great too. Just make sure you have actual tire irons. Trying to do this with screwdrivers is just so hard. Start by pushing the tire down, making sure it's off the bead. There's a little lip in there that it sits up on. Make sure that's down. And then start pulling the tire over the rim. There's a sweet spot here. A little too far out, it's hard to push the tire iron, and too close, it's hard to get the tire iron in too. The sweet spot right about there. Just work your way around the tire. And let's do the same on the other side. Now when you get both sides of the tire off, push the rim down in the tire like that. And that gives you enough room to just pull the rim outside like this. Now I guess at this point, if you were just replacing the tube, you would keep the same tire, but I have a brand new tire, so we're throwing all this out. So most tubes come with 2 nuts on the stem here. Take off the top one, but leave this bottom one on and make sure it's tight. I wouldn't use a wrench or anything, but I'd get it about as tight as you can with your hand. It's not too big a deal, but if you have some baby powder, squirt a little bit in the tire. It helps with the rubber chafing on the tire from the tube. And put just a little bit of air in your tube. And let's put it in the tire. Take a good look at your rim and make sure there isn't any sharp spots or spoke ends sticking up. You can check for loose spokes right now. If there is, tighten them up. I have this tire mount soap off of Amazon, and it really makes the job a lot easier. You can use dish soap if you need to, or also a little bit of Armor All can really help. But definitely get something on the bead here. It just makes the process go a lot easier. Some of these have arrows showing you which way they got to spin. I don't see any arrows on this one, so I think we can go either direction. So start by putting the stem through the rim. And grab that nut that you took off earlier and just put it on a couple threads. That way it'll hold that stem from falling back through. Now, if you really want to learn how to do tires, you got to look at Dirt Bike TV. Jay does such a nice job doing tires. So tuck the tire in, make sure this top bead isn't down in there. The bottom bead should be down in the rim. Top bead should be off of it. Work the tire on. You don't need to worry too much about pinching the tube at this point. So that's the first bead. Flip it over and check. Sometimes the tube will get caught under this bead. Just make sure it's up in there where it's supposed to be. You don't have to have a bead buddy, but they're pretty handy. You flip the bead, you get the bead started like this, and slide this in, and it helps hold the bead down as you work your way around. Now this is where you can worry about the pinching the tube. When you put the tire iron in, make sure there's no rubber between the little hook and the edge of the rim. That's where most pinches happen. Use your hand and push this bead down into the gutter of the rim as you work your way around. Small bites are important on these little wheels. And slide the rim on the tire to make sure your stem's coming out nice and straight. Take a good look at the bead, make sure it's seated all the way up on both sides. Most of the internet says to leave this top nut loose so that there's some wiggle room when the tire slips on the rim. So before you put the wheel back on, let's get a little fresh grease on the axle and on this wheel spacer over here. A little extra grease on this spacer really helps provide a waterproof seal. When the wheel's going on, the first thing is this brake rod. That's the first thing that makes contact. And then after that, it's this channel that holds the brake drum straight. Get those two things lined up, and then you can put the rear axle in. Make sure you have this axle adjuster on there. This side, we got to work in the freshly greased axle spacer. Once that's in, you can push the axle all the way through. And push the whole thing forward and put your chain back on. Before the nut goes on, you got to get the other axle adjuster. And now don't tighten this up quite yet. You need a 10mm and a 12mm to adjust this rear axle location. The free play of the chain is 20mm or 3/4 of an inch. We have way too much play. So you loosen these two nuts and tighten or loosen them, moving the wheel back and forth until you have the right amount of free play. Use these lines right above the axle to make sure both sides are equal. Once you like where both sides of the axle are at, you can tighten up the axle with that 19mm and 14mm on the other side. The last and most important step is to put this nut back on the brake rod. You can fine tune wherever that needs to be. Now that you've watched me do it, I'm sure you can do it on your own. These Honda 50s are the best bike they ever made. Thanks for watching.